Maintenant.
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 4 of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to the motion adopted on February 8, 2022, the committee is meeting to study the desecration of monuments honoring veterans.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceeding will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Today's meeting is also taking place in a webinar format. Webinars are for public committee meetings and are available only to members, their staff, and witnesses. Members are immediately as active participants. All functionalities for active participants remain the same. Staff will be non-active participants and can therefore only view the meeting in gallery view. I would like to take the opportunity to remind all participants of this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. And when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Final reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. En ce qui concerne la liste des personnes.
With respect to the list of speakers, the clerk of the committee and I will do our best to maintain the established speaking order for all members, whether they attend the meeting in person or remotely. I will tell you, as usual, when you have about 1 minute left and when your time is up and it is time to conclude, please. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. They are with us for the whole meeting until 8:30. We have with us from the Department of National Defense, Stephen Harris, Chief Historian, Directorate of History and Heritage. From the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Stéphane Derry, Assistant Deputy Minister, Real Property Services Branch. And from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Crystal Garrett-Baird, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and Commemoration. We'll go to opening statements from witnesses. Each group will have up to 5 minutes to present their statement before we move to questions from members. I know that Stephen Harris from National Defense will not be making an opening statement. So, without further ado, I would like to invite from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Stéphane Derry, to make his opening remarks. You have exactly 5 minutes for your statement. So you can turn your microphone on and you have the floor, Mr. Derry.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to all. I am pleased to appear before this committee for the first time as Assistant Deputy Minister for the Real Property Services Branch at Public Services and Procurement Canada to discuss the important role PSPC plays in protecting and maintaining the National War Memorial as well as the tomb of the unknown soldier. PSPC manages one of the largest and most diverse portfolios of real estate in the country and is the Government of Canada's real estate expert. PSPC provides safe, healthy, and productive working environments for over 260,000 federal employees across Canada, including accommodation to parliamentarians and a full range of real property services. We are also custodian of special purpose and iconic assets, including bridges, dams, and monuments such as the National War Memorial and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Is deeply symbolic and important to Canadians as it's recognized the sacrifice of all Canadian Armed Force personnel who have served Canada and helped the country become what it is today, including Caporal Nathan Cirillo, who passed away at the site during the tragic event of October 22nd, 2014. PSPC share custodianship of the National War Memorial Site with the National Capital Commission, and both organizations take great pride in playing an important role in the maintenance of the site. Over time, PSPC has developed important partnership with the NCC, the Ottawa Police Services, and the Parliamentary Precinct Security Operations Center, as well as with key stakeholders such as the Department of National Defence and Veterans Affairs Canada, to ensure appropriate coordination of security-related matters at or near the site. Ensuring the safety and security of the site is a joint effort, but ultimately the policing of the site is under the jurisdiction of the Ottawa Police Services. All security-related incidents, including any desecrations, are reported to the Ottawa Police Services immediately for their action. Unfortunately, given the national significance of the National War Memorial, it can be perceived as a strategic target by some groups, including protesters, which has occasionally resulted in damage to monuments and otherwise disrespectful behavior. Protests such as the occupation of the National War Memorial Site from July to October 2020 by the organization known as the Canadian Revolution and the ongoing convoy protests requires a delicate balance between applying our authority under the Public Work Nuisance Regulation and the need to balance jurisdiction, legislation, the right through protest, and human rights. Following the occupation of the site in 2020, PSPC acknowledged that similar incidents were likely to become more frequent in the future. As a mitigation measure, PSPC developed a security incident playbook designed to facilitate an effective and coordinated response among stakeholders to similar events impacting monuments, building, engineering, and/or architectural assets under the custodianship of PSPC. Over the last few weeks, PSPC has used the playbook to guide their action in an attempt to mitigate risk and damage to monuments and buildings in Ottawa's downtown core. Notably, PSPC, at the request of the City of Ottawa and the NCC, has installed temporary fencing and barrier around several monuments, including the National War Memorial, the National Aboriginal Veteran Monument, and the Monument to Canadian Fallen, to ensure their integrity and prevent them from damage and vandalism. En conclusion, Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, in closing, I want to stress that there is no excuse for the desecration of national monuments. PSPC will continue to work with its partners to ensure that these important monuments are safeguarded from damage and otherwise disrespectful behavior. I am confident that the lessons learned as part of the government's response to the aforementioned situations at the National War Memorial will be helpful to guide future decision-making regarding the protection of monuments, and that it will help this committee in its study. Thank you. Thank you for having invited me, and I will be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dede.
Let's go to Mrs. Garrett Bird for her allocution. So please open your mic and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Merci de m'avoir invité.
Thank you for having invited me to join you today.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I speak to you from is the traditional and unceded territory of the Abiguit Mi'kmaq First Nation. I also want to take a moment to recognize that today is National Flag of Canada Day, a day to reflect on what the flag means to each of us. It was Canadian Second World War veteran George Stanley who designed our national flag. Je vous remercie de votre...
Thank you for your concern for Canada's national monuments honoring veterans, such as the National War Memorial, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and the Aboriginal Veterans Monument, all of which are sacred and symbolic.
In addition to providing benefits and services to support the well-being of veterans and their families, the department has a mandate to keep the memory alive of the achievements and sacrifices of those who served Canada in times of war, military conflict, and peace. We do so by engaging Canadians of all ages in paying tribute to veterans and those who died in service, and ensuring that the legacy of their tremendous contributions to peace and freedom are preserved for generations to come. Veterans Affairs Canada fulfills this core responsibility through two distinct programs. The Canada Remembers program ensures that those who served in Canada's military efforts are honored and that the memory of their sacrifices and achievements is preserved. This is done through ceremonies and events, honors and awards, and telling the stories of brave Canadians who have served. The Funeral and Burial Program provides financial assistance for the funeral, burial, and grave marking expenses of qualified veterans. Notre travail de commémoration exige...
Our commemorative work requires close collaboration with partners and stakeholders, including other federal institutions, veterans organizations, non-governmental organizations, municipalities, schools, and museums. Our partner organizations share our commitment to honoring those.
Chair.
Yes, okay, yes, Mrs. Just a second, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm having a hard time understanding the translation because the volume is comparable to what the speaker is saying, so it's not very clear at all. I'm not sure if they can adjust the sound there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Excuse me. Let's. I'm going to ask the clerk to verify with the technicians if everything can be resolved. Please, just a second, Mrs. Garrett Bird. Miss Garrett Bird, won't be long.
If I may, sorry to interrupt, if I may, Madame Garrett Bird, if you could just make sure that when you speak, you have the floor selected. I think that's why it creates the same volume for English and French.
Translation off, yeah.
Translation off. You're okay?
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go back and Ms. Garrett Bird, you have more than 2 minutes to go. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Monuments and cenotaphs recognize the commitment and sacrifices of Canadians who have served. They are a public space to remember the selfless duty of Canadians who have bravely put their lives on the line in the defense of peace and freedom. These monuments and cenotaphs also give future generations an opportunity to learn and remember. The National War Memorial, also called the Response, was built after the First World War and symbolizes the sacrifices of all Canadians who have served in the cause of peace and freedom. It is the site of Canada's annual National Remembrance Day ceremony, organized by the Royal Canadian Legion. It was also the site where Corporal Nathan Cirillo tragically passed away in October 2014. Over the years, the highly visible and prolific memorial has been rededicated to include other conflicts and missions. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was added to the memorial in 2000, and it serves as a reminder to all Canadians of the human cost of our country's commitment to peace and freedom. The richly symbolic National Aboriginal Veterans Monument was unveiled in 2001. The sculpture is a tribute to the many Indigenous peoples who served for and defended the freedom of our country over the years.
Madame
It
Garrett,
reflects traditional...
sorry
Yes?
to interrupt. The interpreters are asking me if you could just make your boom mic a little farther from your mouth. It's too close right now. There's like...
Is that better?
Can you just physically bend it so it can just be a little further from your mouth? Sorry again.
No, that's okay. Is that better?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
These monuments and several others located in the National Capital Region are visible records of our identity as a nation. The National Capital Commission plays an important role in protecting these cultural assets and managing them as part of Canada's legacy. SPAC agit en tant que gardien le site de
PSPC acts as a guardian of the National War Memorial, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and the Monument to Aboriginal Soldiers.
Canada works with the National Capital Commission, PSPC, concerning the National War Memorial, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, National Aboriginal Veterans Monument, and other commemorative structures. We closely work with other partners as well to organize ceremonies and events for commemorative milestones. I want to take this time to thank PSPC and the National Capital Commission for their work and support on commemoration and over the past number of weeks. These updates have enabled us to keep our stakeholders informed. We know the situation in recent weeks has been challenging, and our priority is the health, well-being of our veterans. Thank you for your time today. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And right now, we're going to start the round of questions. Et je voudrais demander aux membres.
I would like to ask members, when you will ask a question, please say for who your question is, because we have representatives from 3 departments, National Defense, Public Works, and Veterans Affairs. So before moving to the first question, Mr. Luc Desilets, you have something to say? Yes, Mr. Chair. Could you situate us regarding tonight's votes? The bells are ringing at 8, I believe, so I wanted to know how we'd be proceeding. Will we really be going until 8:30 before we transfer? So what I wanted to propose to committee members is that, yes, at 8 p.m. the bells should ring, but we know that the vote is at 8:30 p.m., so I might ask the whole team, all members, if they would like to continue 15 minutes and stop at about 8:15 p.m. so that we can use our cell phones to vote. I'd like to have the team's consent, but I plan to do it when the bell started ringing. It could be at 8 p.m. or 8:05, so then the clerk will let me know, and I will obtain the members' consent at that time. Mr. Chair, if I may, it's just that I have a request from the interpreters once again, if I may. Ms. Garrett Baird.
Just please bend your mic because there's still some difficulty for the interpreters to hear you. No, just you have to actually bend the mic so it can stay further from your mouth. And if you could raise it a little so it can be between your lip, upper lip, and your nose. If you could just say one few words.
Good evening. Is that working better for the interpreters?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Voilà, merci beaucoup. Les premières questions seront posées par le...
Thank you very much. The first questions will be by the first vice chair of the committee, Mr. Caputo.
For 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci. Thank you all for attending, Chief Historian, and to both Assistant Deputy Ministers. Like most Canadians, I was very much disturbed by what we had seen, and I rose in the House of Commons last Monday or I guess 2 Mondays ago now, to reflect how I felt. Now, this message is for all 3 witnesses, and I'm going to read out some language because we're looking at moving forward and how we should best move forward. The question relates to Section 430, sub 4.11 of the Criminal Code, which says everyone who commits mischief in relation to property that is a building, structure, or part thereof that primarily serves as a monument to honor persons who were killed or died as a consequence of war, including a war memorial or cenotaph, or an object associated with honoring or remembering those that is located in or on the grounds of such a building or structure, or a cemetery, is guilty of an indictable offense or an offense punishable on summary conviction. And then it gives the penalty section, and then the maximum sentence when proceeding by indictment is 10 years. So the question I have to all three witnesses is this. Do you believe that these provisions are adequate and or appropriate given your knowledge in this area?
Let's start with Mr. Harris.
Mr. Chair, I'm afraid I'm going to have to say I am an historian, right. and that question is beyond my purview as the representative here as the chief historian.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Derry, in the second place.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say that as the manager, custodian of the site, I'm not responsible for the law enforcement at the site. We monitor the site 24 hours, 7 days a week, and we report any incident to law enforcement so that they can take action from any of our site that we manage. So I wouldn't be able to comment that if the criminal code the wording is strong enough, or the action that could be taken by law enforcement. Law enforcement are well served by what's written in the criminal code.
Sorry, thank you. So, Ms. Garrett-Burt, I don't know if you'd like to intervene.
The mandate of Veterans Affairs Canada is to keep the memory alive of the achievements and sacrifices of all those who served Canadians in times of war, military conflict, and in peace. We do not have any role in terms of law enforcement or anything of the sort. We're very focused on providing benefits and services to veterans and their families in the interests of their well-being, and as I noted, to commemorate those sacrifices and achievements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your answers. And I'm not sure whether anybody will be able to answer this, but I will ask the question. To all three, are any of you aware of how often the memorials and cenotaphs are targeted for vandalism?
I will say, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of those statistics at all.
If I could speak, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Since 2017, 5 years, we have noticed 17, desecration or, two accident at the site that were reported to the police. 5 of those, from 2017 approximately, and 5 of those happened between January 28 and today. 5 of those incidents, but in total, in the last 5 years, was 17 incidents, minor to more damage to the tomb of the unknown soldier. So there's 17 of them. Thank you.
Yeah. Open your mic and go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, you mentioned that 17 had occurred. Do you know if there were arrests or charges in any of those 17?
Thank you. Really good question. Our role, as I mentioned earlier, we're the custodian of the site. So our role is to preserve, maintain the site, ensure that it is there when Canadians want to be. There's approximately, about 1 million Canadians coming to the National War Memorial site every year. So we want to make sure the site is in a perfect condition when they're there. So with the NCC, our partner that does the maintenance of the site, we ensure that the site is in perfect condition. As soon as an incident is reported, is seen or noticed, it's reported to the police. From there, I couldn't tell how many of those incidents have been, how many arrests there have been. It would be a question for the police of Ottawa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Derry. Thank you, Mr. Caputo. And now let's go to Mr. Sean Casey. Floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here. I'm going to start with Ms. Garrett Baird. From your seat in the commemorations division at the national headquarters, you are surrounded there with people who dedicate their professional lives to serving veterans. Would you be able to comment on the reaction at the national headquarters of Veterans Affairs among your colleagues and co-workers to what happened in the two incidents at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier?
Yes, and thank you for the question. Over the past number of weeks, we've been working closely with our colleagues at Public Services and Procurement Canada and the National Capital Commission, who have kept us up to date on the situation in Ottawa and how that has been evolving. As a stakeholder, we have been working with them, and we're grateful for that partnership. And we've been able then in turn to link up with our stakeholders to ensure that they're aware of what's happening. As a department, of course, our mandate is to ensure that we continue to commemorate and remember those who have served and have fallen, and to honor their sacrifices and achievements. And that is and continues to be a priority of the department as a key element of our mandate.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett Baird. We don't have before the committee today, to the best of my knowledge, any veterans or veterans organizations. The one with the daily contact with veterans and their organizations would be you and your co-workers in Charlottetown. Have the phones been ringing off the wall? What can you give us some sense for the reaction of your clients to this?
Sure. So it's important to note that there are approximately 600,000 veterans throughout Canada, and around 190,000 of those are actually clients of Veterans Affairs Canada. Our goal and our role is to ensure that we are providing the benefits and services to meet their needs. So where there is a veteran, we know that the events over the past number of weeks have been challenging for Canadians and for veterans and for those who are serving. And the health and safety and well-being of those veterans is our top priority. So any veteran who is having challenges that may have been compounded by ongoing events are encouraged to contact the VAC assistance line at 1-800-268-7708. In terms of our stakeholders, we have been engaged with them. Of course, they have been very concerned about how things are going, but they are grateful for the engagement with our partners at PSPC and the National Capital Commission, and for the ongoing dialogue that we have with them. But like us, these organizations want to ensure that our memorials and monuments continue to be public spaces to recognize, remember, and commemorate those who have served.
Last question for you, Ms. Garrett Baird, and then I'm going to move on. On Saturday, there was a slow roll convoy that started in all points of Prince Edward Island and rolled past the cenotaph at Province House. I expect you're aware of it, and one of the significant news stories that came from that convoy was the act of a single veteran, Owen Parkhouse. I expect you're familiar with that, Ms. Garrett Baird. Would you please share with the committee what happened in front of the cenotaph in Charlottetown on Saturday morning?
Yes, thank you for the question. So as the member referred to in Charlottetown on Saturday, there was a convoy like there was in other parts of the country. It started on John Yo Drive in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and then continued to move down University Avenue, which turns into Great George Street. And at the end of Great George Street is our cenotaph that is in front of Province House, or our provincial legislature. And what occurred at that convoy is that as vehicles continued to the end of Great George Street and turned, a veteran, Mr. Owen Parkhouse, was at the cenotaph, ensuring that veterans and the importance of those who have served was recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, it's a pleasure to see you again. You always provide such interesting insights before this committee. I'm going to ask you a broad question because I hope that you will have some more today. Being the chief historian, where it's often said that if we forget our history, we're bound to repeat the mistakes or something along those lines. From where you sit, sir, what can we learn from our history to ensure that what we've seen here in recent weeks won't be repeated? Can you provide some sort of historical?
Yes, but please leave 15 seconds to Mr. Harris to have a quick answer, please. In 15 seconds, so we can go back.
I'm not sure I can say there are lessons learned. What I would say is that Canadians do remember and do honor, and they don't need to be told to do that. The best example was the bridges over Highway 401 after the four were killed in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. C'est tout le temps que nous avons, donc.
That's all the time we have. So now we will go to Mr. Luc Desilets, the second vice chair of the committee. So you have the floor, Mr. Desilets. Go ahead, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dady, I'd like for you to tell me about what has been done concretely as desecration. I read in the newspapers, I didn't see it on the site what happened. So could you describe for me what happened? There were cars, that's significant, but I'd like to know what you have to say.
Oui, merci pour.
Thank you for the question. The interpreter notes the sound cuts out. There are people who've used the monuments as a public toilet. Some people have danced on the tomb of the unknown soldier. I've just been told that the Ottawa police is asking for the public to assist in identifying the person who was filmed dancing on the tomb. It's a lack of respect that happened since January 28th over the past few weeks. Thank you for that clarification. You referred to 17 incidents earlier. Are we talking about the 3 monuments in Ottawa or of other monuments outside Ottawa? Thank you for the question. The sound is cutting out. Public Services and Procurement Canada is the guardian of the monument to veterans, to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So the 17 incidents, I was referring to that group of monuments in Ottawa that is under video surveillance 24/7 by our colleagues in parliamentary operations. In your opinion, this is a pretty particular protest. It's an occupation, to be more precise. Would it have been possible to prevent this situation, in your opinion? I'll try to. Thank you very much for the question. I think that's a very good question. It's extremely difficult to answer it. The sound has cut out.
Où on n'a jamais vécu.
We are in unprecedented times, unprecedented protests. There have been others around the protest before, around the monument rather. The sound is cutting out.
Et pour nous, on a travaillé de très près avec nos
We've worked closely with our colleagues at Veterans Affairs, the RCMP, the Ottawa Police, to ensure crowd control as best as possible and to protect the monument. To give you an example of how this event is out of the ordinary, my team, which I'm very proud of, has spent a lot of time over the past 3 weeks putting concrete barriers up to support the Ottawa Police, the City of Ottawa, and the province. So our whole organization has mobilized on evenings and weekends to put up concrete barriers to have a certain amount of security based on the requests of the City of Ottawa and the Ottawa Police, as well as the provincial police. When you're talking about barriers, you're talking about barriers in Ottawa, not around the 3 sites in question. Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, I'm also talking about the 3 sites. Sound has cut out. The sound has cut out. We put a fence around the National War Memorial, around the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, 8-foot-tall barriers, and at the request of the National Capital Commission, which is responsible for the 2 other monuments, we also put fences around the 2 other monuments in Ottawa. So it's unlikely that such events would happen in the coming days if the occupation of Ottawa. Sound has cut out. The interpreter missed the end of the question. Mr. Chair, on February 12th, barriers that were set up around the National War Memorial, we were asked to reinstall them, to tie them to the ground.
Ne pas les réinstaller parce que les policiers.
The police feared that it would be used as projectiles and that we could escalate tension between protesters and police officers. And sound has cut out again.
Et vos réponses sont très claires.
Your answers are very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Desilets.
Let's go to Miss Rachel Blenay for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank the interpreters that are doing their best, but we are having some witness cut out once in a while, so I just want to recognize their incredible hard work and hope that we can figure out the issue. If I could come to you, Mr. Derry, I just want to thank all the witnesses, of course, for their testimony, but I'm really curious to understand a little bit more about the procedure and process to protect the monuments. I do know that of course, you spoke about the temporary fences. It went around the tomb for the forgotten soldier or the lost soldier. And I do know that at the same time, the other monuments weren't given the same treatment. So I'm just wondering, what is the process? You know, do all of the 3 monuments get the same treatment at the same time? Or is there certain processes that have to happen to make sure that they are taken care of differently? I'm just trying to get clarity in that.
Please go ahead, Mr. Derry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a really good question, and Mr. Chair, as I was trying to explain to the committee, Public Services and Procurement Canada is custodian of the National War Memorial and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and other monuments around the National Capital Region, but we are not the custodian of the two other monuments, the veteran Aboriginal and the Canadian Fallen. So those monuments are under the responsibility of the NCC. So on February 4th, we had the request of this city of Ottawa saying that due to the event that were happening in the city, they couldn't properly ensure the safety and the security of the National War Memorial and the unknown soldiers. So that's why they asked us to install fence around the monument. I have to say that this is not done. It's in my knowledge and in my team's knowledge, it hasn't been done since 1939, when the monument was first unveiled. And maybe Mr. Harris will correct me. It was only done around the monument when it was under renovation or restoration. So this is not done as a fait accompli. We consulted with all of our colleagues, Veterans Affairs, D&D, National Defense, everyone, to ensure that they were in agreement with us installing fence around the public monument. The other two monuments, the next day or the same night, we were asked by the National Capital Commission to install fence around those as well. So there is no precedence on one monument to the other, but there's a custodian that has to take the responsibility. And then there's a lot of communication between those groups. And I would say that these fence went up close to at the same time, or if a few hours after or a day after, it was because of the number of people we could deploy to these different sites.
Well, thank you so much. That's very helpful. So I just want to clarify for the record. I just want to make sure I understand. So temporary fences have never been put up before this, or only when they were building the monument. I just want to make sure that I understood that piece. I'm not sure if it's Mr. Harris that is the right person to ask, but if somebody could clarify that for me, I would appreciate it.
The only instances I know of, apart from the construction and the reconstitution of the monument, is on November the 11th. At times there are crowd control fences for the Remembrance Day event, and that's simply a crowd control measure for that event. It's not defensive, if I can put it that way.
Very, very helpful. Thank you so much. If I can come back to you, Mr. Derry, you referred in your report, through you, of course, Mr. Chair, I apologize for that. You mentioned in your report to us that there is a security incident playbook that was developed to make sure that there was an effective and coordinated response. I'm just wondering if you could let the committee know if this was followed, the playbook was followed in this occupation, and how was it followed? Who is ultimately in charge? And then I guess my last question is there any way for the members to see or access the copy of the playbook, or if that's kept securely?
Thank you very much for the question. Mr. Chair, I will definitely be happy to provide the committee with a copy of the playbook. It's not a security incident playbook that was developed only for the War Memorial itself, but it was developed for all of our property and buildings. How do we deal with manifestation and people coming? So we follow that playbook to the letter, and it helped us a lot. As an example, the National War Memorial land around the War Memorial, before 2020, there was 3 custodians of the land. The NCC owned a parcel of it, we own a parcel of it, and Park Canada owned a parcel of it. It's not necessarily the same jurisdiction or reglementation that apply to each of the parcel of land. Since then, Public Services and Procurement has the west side of and the east side of the monument, the lawn, and the front is owned by the NCC. So we've made tremendous
Thank
strive to
you.
simplify the management of this property and ensuring
Thank
its
you.
safety.
Thank you, Mr. Derry. Thank you, Ms. Blaney. So now let's go to Mr. Fraser Tolmie for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that, and let me get myself sorted out here. I have a couple of questions, and I appreciate our guests being here. And I just for clarity, there were some numbers that were thrown out. 17 times that the National Cenotaph has been vandalized. Was that correct? The number that I was given there? I believe Mr. Derry was the one that gave me that.
Thank you for the really good question. Mr. Chair, yes, I mentioned since 2017, there had 17 incidents, minor to more, and depending what we see minor, but disrespectful incident at the National War Memorial and on the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Okay, so there has been 17 since 2017, and they're disrespectful incidents, is how you've phrased them. So there has been 5 recently, and there was a question brought up earlier on about the desecration. So is an incident where someone dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier, that is considered one incident, and then someone else doing something else is another incident? Is that what you're? Could you clarify that for me?
Absolutely, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, one incident is related to a person dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier. That is reported to the police. There's maybe another incident the next day happening at the site, and following those 5 incidents happen in between January 28 and today.
Okay, and was there damage that, like, cost associated damage to those incidents?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. For the 5 incidents that we're talking that happened from January 28 till today, there was no cost incurred other than installing the fencing and all of this, but that was not an incident. That was a preventive measure. But there was no cost related to the incident, to my knowledge. I verify, but I could tell you there was no cost incurred with these lack of respect to the monument.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are you aware of any other cenotaphs or war memorials across this country that have been damaged, vandalized? Is that something
Thank you for the question. I would like to have an answer. I mean, are we talking from January 28, 29 to now? Or are we talking
No, historically. Historically, has there been war memorials or cenotaphs across this country that have been vandalized?
Sorry, there's some echo. Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, I would say that I'm not aware from across Canada perspective. I'm aware that the helmet of the tomb of the unknown soldier has been damaged in 2020, was not necessarily related to the protest that was happening there, but it was damaged at that time in 2020, and it was repaired by us within hours of finding out that it had been damaged.
Well, I
couldn't.
Yeah, that's disappointing to hear. And so there is a difficult balance between ensuring that these sacred spaces are available to the public, but also protected from hateful acts. How do you believe these two priorities should be balanced?
Well, me to answer, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please. Yes,
go ahead. You can. Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult balance, Mr. Chair, balancing because the right to protest and the freedom of right in Canada, Charter of Rights in Canada, and the protection of national monument like these one. And I think it's a balance that I honestly, as a custodian of the site, I will rely on the police force to help us to make that balance. Sometime there would be tent. There's a tent right now that's set up on one part of the lawn, and with the police, they were advised. And I think there's a balance to be made there, and I rely on the police force to help us to make that determination.
Thank you so much, Mr. Derry. Thank you, Mr. Tolmi. And right now, let's go to Mr. Wilson Miao for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for joining us today for this discussion. It's really sad to see what had happened due to the convoy to our monument and sentiment. But at the same time, I remember Mr. Derry had mentioned the temporary fence was installed to protect those monuments. However, it was also taken away by these protesters. Looking at this experience and learning from it, do you suggest we implement a new security strategy or a set of procedure in the future to avoid things like this happening?
Mr. Derry, please. Mr. Derry, you can answer. Pouvez répondre immédiatement.
You may answer the question immediately.
Excusez-moi,
Excuse me, I missed part of the question. I don't know if there was a problem with my headset. Mr. Miao.
Repeat the question, please.
Yes, of course. So with regards to the temporary fence that was installed to protect these monuments during the protests, it's unfortunate to see that it was also removed. And to avoid this, it was not installed back immediately because of the circumstance. How do you see the potential of implementing a new security strategy or measure in the future if similar situation happen again?
Thank you very much for the question. This is a really, really good question, Mr. Chair. As the custodian of the site and the person responsible for maintaining the site, restoring the site when it need, or repairing the site when it need to be repaired, and working with the NCC to maintain the lawn around the site, on this question, since the monument had never been fenced in, other than as my colleague, Mr. Stephen Harris mentioned, other than for crowd control, lower fence at 3 foot tall, it's a shame in our view to have to fence a monument to protect it. And it's also a public place to allow more than 1 million people to pay respect to those that have given their life to make this country what it is today. So our objective is to make this site as open as possible to people to come and pay respect. At the same time, as I said, we're maintaining the site. We're not the person policing the site or enforcing the law. On all of these, which is it's a balance that is hard to maintain, and we rely really on the police force to tell us, we can't ensure, as it happened on February 4th, we can't ensure the security of the site. Please close it in. And on February 12th, when the fence was removed, we were told it's dangerous that if we were thinking about should we put the fence back? Again, talking to all of our partner in this, and, we were told it could be worse putting the fence than than leaving it off. So a decision was made at the time based on the police force recommendation to leave it off. But it is a balance that this committee could look at on, the access to the public versus fencing the monument in and, preventing public access to it.
So thank you, Mr. Derry, for your answer. And I understand that have open access to these monuments for anyone that would like to visit. But is there a potential of putting something permanent to protect this in the near future? Apart from, I remember you mentioned there are security camera um, uh, monitoring the site 24/7, but at the same time, there are possibly times where someone intend to vandalize these monuments and have not been penalized or to the attention of the police force. Do you feel the necessity of putting something there permanently or having security there during specific time to protect these monuments?
In 10 seconds, please, Mr. Derry, if you can't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have also patrol that go to the monument twice in night and twice after dinner at 9 o'clock and 11 and 1 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the morning. So we have patrol of commissioner that go around the site to make sure that everything is okay, in addition to the camera monitoring 24/7.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Derry. Now we will go to Mr. Desilets for 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Harris, I'll ask you a question. In your opinion, with your experience, you're a historian. Sound has cut out. Is this because of human stupidity? Or in the past, have we seen similar actions?
I'm afraid I didn't get all of the question. As the interpreter said, the sound cut out after about 10 seconds.
D'accord, merci, Jacques.
Okay, I will stop your time and I will check with the clerk. I know that in the room there was a sound issue. Can the clerk tell us if it has been addressed? Oh, yes, go ahead, please. Mr. Chair, yes, we may have a solution to resolve this issue. Could we suspend for 5 minutes if the committee allows it? We could address the issue, try to fix the problem? Yes, absolutely. Yes, given the difficulty for interpretation, I suspend the meeting.
No, merci.
Okay, we will resume our meeting. Mr. Desilets, you had the floor. I invite you to start again at the beginning because you only had a few seconds in, and the witness hadn't understood the question. So 2.5 minutes. Let's start over. My question was for Mr. Harris. I'd like to know, as a historian, is his perception of these events that this is an isolated incident due to the stupidity of a few individuals, or is it something that happens frequently over time with these monuments?
Thank you for the question. That's actually a tough question to answer. I don't recall monuments having been attacked like this, certainly not this kind of monument, a monument to the fallen. Although, spread across the country, units erect monuments to their own, and they aren't required to report to us anything that happens to them. I have never heard of anything like this happening elsewhere before. That makes me hope that it's an isolated event. Okay. But the one thing I was taught as an historian is historians don't predict because they don't always agree on the past.
C'est ça. C'est bien dit.
That's well said. I like that. In your opinion, is it a matter of education? This affects us at the committee. We care about veterans at this committee. Is there a lack of education with people that is at the cause of this, in your opinion?
Was that directed to me, sir? I'm not sure it's a lack of education because Veterans Affairs, I know their programs well. Their outreach programs reach into schools across the country. And when it comes to the overseas commemorative events, the major news networks broadcast live. I think a Canadian who was not aware of the service and sacrifice of the past is probably not aware of a lot, if I can put it that way.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Harris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Thank you very much, Mr. Desilets. 2.5 minutes went by quickly. So now I will ask Ms. Blaney to take the floor for 2.5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And through you, I would like to come back to Mr. Dere. And I have a question. You know, in what you talked about earlier, you talked about the need to balance jurisdiction, legislation, and the right to protest and human rights. And you also talked about the public works nuisance regulations. I know that Section 6, Bracket 1 states that no person shall occupy, reside, camp, or sleep in or upon any public work or use any vehicle for the purpose of occupying a public work or residing, camping, or sleeping thereon. So I guess my question is, where do we and how do we draw the line, and who draws the line between the protesters' lack of respect to the veterans and to the monuments and a need for protection? And you spoke also about the space for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And there's that grassy part, which I've seen people camp out on before. So I just wanted to ask about that as well, just the jurisdiction of who is in charge of what part, and how do you figure out how to address these issues when some people come in and, for example, that protest in 2020 where they were camped there for extended amount of time. Thank you.
Mr. Deary, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the question. This is a complicated question. It doesn't seem like it, but Mr. Chair, let me explain. In 2020, at some point there was 2 tents on the monument at the west side of the monument behind and the east side of the monument. The nuisance regulation under the Public Work Nuisance Regulation could only apply to the west side of the monument because this ground was owned by PSPC at the time. the east side of the monument was owned by Park Canada, and the nuisance regulation is only for public work grounds, so it wouldn't apply there. So there's a lot of people involved, like lawyers, legal, coordination with all of our colleagues, measuring the and law enforcement officer measuring the risk of of damage to the monument, intervention, and what the interventions will what will be the gain of the intervention. And maybe I don't have the right English term here, but
thank you. In closing, yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Time is over. So now let's go to Miss Anna Roberts for 5 minutes, please.
Here. So I have a couple of questions. I'm a little confused too, to be honest with you. It sounds like this house is owned by 3 different people, and I often wonder who takes care of what and who assigns those duties. It's quite confusing. I think sometimes we should simplify things and make it under the jurisdiction of one area. But my question to you is this. Given the lessons learned during this protest, we can all agree here that the monuments are very important to every Canadian. What our veterans do for us, for our freedoms, is very important, and we value them. So, given the lessons that we've learned, what measures do you recommend need to be taken to ensure any further destruction doesn't reoccur? How can we protect our monuments? What in the last, given the recent situation, you recommended that the monument is secured with cameras. And you also, there was a mention that every 2 hours, I believe, maybe I've got that wrong, the police rotate and inspect it. Given the protest and given what we've seen, would it not be beneficial that it is monitored on a 24/7 situation?
Mr. Derry?
Thank you for the question. And Mr. Chair, if you allow me, I will answer really quickly on the ownership of the custodianship of the land. We used to be 3 custodians before 2020. We're resolving those. We're now owning. Park Canada is not an owner of ground anymore there. It's PSPC owning with the NCC. So we've resolved some of these difficulty and the ownership of the land, so we can take better decision, faster decision, consulting with all our partner. As I mentioned, there's 4 times a night, there's a patrol at the monument by commissioner. There's also a closed circuit camera, upgraded one, that are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they can be by our parliamentary operations center, where they can be reacting quickly, advising the city of Ottawa that there's something is happening at the site. The site is not part of the parliamentary precinct, so it's not policed by the Parliamentary Protective Services. It's policed by the Ottawa Police, so it's under the jurisdiction of the Ottawa Police, but that oversight is done on a 24 hours, 7 days a week monitoring camera.
Thank you for that. So through you, Mr. Chair, help me understand this. If we have the security cameras that are on a 24-hour situation and they are being monitored, do we have any idea of the individuals that have destroyed or vandalized the monuments? And if we have the security, is it possible to get identification so that they can be brought to justice?
I believe the question is addressed to me. If Mr. Chair, if you allow me, I will answer.
Yes, please.
All that video footing is passed on to the police services for prosecution, finding who has committed these outrageous, lack of respect. And I have one in front of me at January 29 at 5:26 in the morning. two individuals appearing to be male wearing black coats arrive at the southeast of the monument, and they do what they have to do. That was reported to the police with clear image from camera number 12. And that's the kind of monitoring that is done. But I would like to also put in perspective, over the last 5 years, we talked about 17 incidents, 5 happening in the last 3 weeks. Out of these 17 incidents, and you take into consideration that there's probably be approximately 5 million Canadian visiting the site over the last 5 years. There's been 17 incidents. So, and I think that the committee have to look at that when they make recommendation on how open the site is versus locking the site up and preventing Canadian from accessing the site.
Thank you, Mr. Derry, and thank you, Ms. Roberts. Okay, there is an echo. Well, nous allons donc passer à...
We will now go to Daryl Sampson for the next 5 minutes. Go ahead, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our 3 witnesses for the information, the important information they've shared with us. I must say that the actions we've seen at the monument and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is disgusting. It's very emotional to see what has happened. And then the fence was put up, and we felt a little bit more comfortable with the situation. And then we see protesters taking down the fence. Police officers watching. I still have a very hard time understanding and accepting. Yes, there are very good people protesting, but there are people who are committing crimes and who haven't been held responsible for their actions, and it's unacceptable in my opinion. The Canadian flag that I saw isn't being respected, even though we're celebrating its 57 years today. And I think of Nathan Cirillo in 2014, and that is very painful to me. So I'm trying to think of how it affects our veterans. So hi, Crystal. It's a pleasure to see you. In your conversations with veterans, or has your staff received information from veterans? Have they called in? They call my office and they're very disappointed. Have they shared anything with you that you're aware of?
Good evening, and thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So in terms of veterans, as we're seeing, we represent, or we have about 190,000 veterans that are clients out of over 600,000 in the country. So those that engage with Veterans Affairs Canada are seeking support and benefits and services. Those that have contacted us, we're working with them to ensure that they are getting the support that they need, because Veterans Affairs Canada does offer mental health supports, including the VAC assistance line, access to our operational stress injury clinics, disability benefits, financial benefits for service-related conditions. So we continue to work with any veteran that contacts us to ensure that they're getting the support they need, while acknowledging that we know the incidents as they're unfolding in Ottawa are having an impact on veterans, and we are here to support them.
Thank you for that, because we know this is a trigger for them. Now, Mr. Diddy, you talked about the playbook, and the playbook helped a lot during the events. Do you have ideas of what we could add to the playbook after what we've been through? What do you think? Well, you don't necessarily have to give me exact answers, but what are possible strategies we could include in the playbook in the future to be better prepared?
Merci, Mr. Svensson. Chair, I would say even a better coordination. I would say between all avec tous les intervenants.
With all stakeholders, having better coordination and maybe learn from these events and see them coming. I think we could prepare better to see what's coming, and we've seen different aspects in the country where we saw protests coming, there were preparations, perhaps in consultation with our partners when we know it's coming. When we know things are on their way, we can prepare ourselves accordingly. We had great communication starting on the first day of the events, but perhaps we need better planning before the events. I think I only have about 10 seconds left. Stephen.
Damages across the world. Has there been some examples?
Mr. Sampson, you'll have to wait because your time is up. I'm sorry. We need to move now to Mr. Tolmie.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. I thought it was my colleague, Mr. Caputo, that was going. Is that correct, or am I incorrect?
At the beginning, I had Miss Block, and the clerk told me that you're going to take this. You're going to take that 5 minutes.
Are you okay with that, or do you want?
It's up to you, Fraser. Have you gone already?
I have already gone. Yeah, so I'll let you go, Frank, and then I can go later.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this round here. If I could ask, and I believe that this would be for Mr. Derry, but if I'm not directing it to the right spot, please forgive me. In terms of the incidents, and we've heard about 17, and we've heard about minor to major, I'm just trying to get a sense of what these incidents are. I've got an idea of what a minor incident would be. Could you describe the types of incidents we're seeing in these 17 instances?
Now, thank you very much, Mr. Caputo. Mr. Chair, I don't have all each of incident that happened over the last 5 years. But as an example, those two persons that were seen at night at 5 o'clock in the morning were using the monument as a public washroom, I should say. And to my knowledge, in the last 5 years, there's been minor graffiti on some portion of the monument, and a total lack of respect, although it doesn't cause financial repercussion to us to repair the monument, but it's a total lack of respect to the National War Memorial. And that's the kind of incident. So it's hard for me to say some of them are bigger than other, because I think they're all incident of a total lack of respect and and disrespectful to this monument. But like I said, some that, to my knowledge, there was one, and where we had to repair the helmet of the unknown soldier, of the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Thank you, and I understand exactly what you mean when it comes to respect. There aren't really degrees of disrespect. Something is either disrespectful or it's not. So I appreciate that. Now, when it came to the repair of the helmet, was that the most significant damage that you're aware of, sir?
Yes, President. Yes, that was Chair. That was to my knowledge, that's the most, the one we had to act. There's a few graffiti, the smaller graffiti that we had to also erase. That would be the most expensive damage that we've seen in these incidents. And I'm saying doing that from memory, sir. Could look into getting the accounting for the committee.
Oh, thank you. I'm just looking for a general estimate, just trying to get a flavor for what you're saying. So just so I'm ensured that I have this correct, about 5 million people have visited since 2017, so approximately 1 million people per year for 5 million. Is that right?
We thank you for the question. Since there's no gate at the National War Memorial and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, we're making estimate based on people visiting Parliament. There's approximately 1 million people a year visiting Parliament, and since Canadians pay so much respect to their veteran, we assume that you don't come to Ottawa to visit Parliament without paying respect to the veteran that have put their life forward for this country. So we're also assuming that people visit the site. So that's how we estimated there was about 1 million visitor a year.
I think that's accurate. I know when I brought my family here, we visited the Indigenous War Memorial as well as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So I can understand why you're making that assumption. So if we look at averages, putting aside the last couple of weeks, we average about 2 incidents a year. And those may range from somebody, as you said, using a public toilet or urinating to the damage to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I would say, Chair, it's the desecration and graffiti and things like of that nature. But it would be 12 over the last 5 years if we do not include the 5 that just happened in the last 3 weeks.
Right, that would certainly skew the average. Now, I have a question about the barriers because I saw news coverage, but I'd love to hear the official a response from anybody from who's in the know more so than I am. Now, the barriers that were erected, can anybody describe those for me, please? Were they bolted down? How were they there? Because I didn't have a chance to visit.
Mr. Caputo, someone can answer in about 10, 15 seconds. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will answer. These barriers were bolted together, and they were 8 feet tall by 10 feet of length, each panel, and they were all bolted together. They were not bolted to the paver of the monument, but they were bolted together around the monument. So somebody would have to have tool to dismantle them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Derry. And now let's go to Mr. Rogers, Charles Rogers, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to our guest this evening as well. It's good to see you. And, you know, it's saddens me to have this conversation, really, to see what's happened in the last couple of weeks, to watch the media reports of the things going on around the War Memorial and the lack of respect that we've seen. And I just wanted to ask Ms. Garrett Baird, you know, what kind of feedback have you at Veterans Affairs received from the people most connected to the War Memorial, like veterans and legions and veterans across the country, as they've seen these unfortunate events unfold in Ottawa? And have any of them, you know, any of these people provided suggestions on what they feel are appropriate penalties or ways to increase security for the memorial sites?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the safety and health and well-being of our veterans is the priority. As I mentioned during my remarks, we've been providing updates to our veterans organizations and stakeholders, and of course, they're very saddened to see the disrespect that has occurred. These monuments are public spaces. They are spaces to commemorate, to remember. They're also spaces for our youth to engage and learn about the sacrifices and achievements of those who have served and those who are serving. So there's certainly a level of concern there. We've heard from, for example, the Royal Canadian Legion, who has made a very public statement about their concerns for the safety and protection of the monument and the sacredness of that monument. All of the ones that we have discussed this evening, whether it's the National War Memorial, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the National Aboriginal Veterans Monument, these symbolize something very, very, very sacred to Canadians. These represents the sacrifices that our veterans who have served, that have put their life on the line in the cause of peace and freedom. There is nothing more important for that. And that is why we will continue to work with our partners at PSPC and the National Capital Commission to ensure that these monuments continue to be symbols for Canadians to recognize and remember.
Thank you very much. One other question. I think you made a comment earlier about engaging Canadians of all ages, as you do your work in Veterans Affairs. And as a former administrator and school teacher, I know for a fact that, veterans were recognized and held in high esteem in schools across, particularly in schools that I taught in. And, Memorial Days and Remembrance Days were always celebrated, and veterans were actually invited into the school to talk about the importance of their contribution to the country. So is there something further we can do beyond the kinds of things we've done over the years to, elevate the importance of and the contribution that veterans have made to our country?
Perfect. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So, as part of right now our 10-year strategic plan, this is a blueprint for future commemorative programming. And one of the key elements of this plan is creative approaches to engage all Canadians, including youth, new Canadians, and Indigenous peoples. There needs to be a greater investment in the stewardship, presentation, and commemorative integrity of Canada's commemorative footprint. And it's very clear that we can only keep the achievements and the sacrifices of those who have served alive by ensuring that our youth are aware of their history, the impact on the present, and what it means for the future. So within Veterans Affairs Canada, as part of Veterans Week, of course, we have an extensive suite of learning resources and programming available. We work very closely with schools across the country to receive learning materials and lesson plans that they can use to share with their students and teach them about commemoration and the sacrifices of those who have served. We just finished recently our Valentine's for Veterans, which is a wonderful, wonderful program where our youth are developing Valentines and sharing those with veterans in the long-term care facilities. So this continues to be a focal point and a key area for commemoration as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Miss Garrett Bird. Les cloches sont en train de sonner, donc je...
The bells are ringing, so I will address committee members. I'd like to know if I have unanimous consent to continue this meeting until 8:15. And so we have time to vote. I know there are a number of people in the room, so please indicate to the clerk if you disagree. While those who are virtual, if you disagree, please let me know on the screen.
Mr. Chair, may I address
Yes,
you?
Mr. Caputo.
Thank
yes,
you.
Go ahead.
I'm prepared to provide consent to 8:10. I'm not sure if anybody on my team plans to vote in person. Okay, so 3 members have indicated 8:10, voting in person. So I would suggest 8:10.
8:10. Okay.
That's Mr. Chair. I think Richie and I here in the room are fine with 8:10 as well. Thank you.
Okay. So no objection. So we're gonna go till 8:10, and the clerk will help me to make sure that I'm on time. So right now, let's go to Mr. Desilets pour 2 minutes.
Mr. Desilets, for 2.5 minutes, please. Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was scared I wouldn't have another turn. What I'd like to say, and it may seem a little strange in a committee meeting, but monuments to veterans are something we really care about. It's essential, it's important. It's our connection to our past and our history. Perhaps to say something to Mr. Harris. So I'd like to give you a quote that my staff member gave me. A lack of understanding of the present is due to an ignorance of the past. That being said, I'd like to hear from Mr. Dady. The committee is here to make proposals, to make recommendations. Do you need money? Do you need to change the rules? Do you need to change the laws? Do processes have to be reviewed? That's all. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desilets. Mr. Chair, I'd like to suggest to the committee that they could take inspiration from what is done elsewhere, like in the United States or in other Commonwealth countries, like in Great Britain or Australia. They have events where we may not be used to having in Canada, and they've taken different approaches, similar to what we've done here in Canada, but perhaps they're more advanced. And perhaps the committee could take inspiration from those committees to see how we could improve the stature of commemorative monuments and to ensure a greater presence. I don't want to interrupt you, but we're running out of time. Do you have concrete examples we could include in our report? I'll give you a concrete example. In the United Kingdom, if there's a tent set up at night, it's taken down that very night. It's automatic. No matter who it is, it's automatic. The police service, it wouldn't be the city police, it would be the RCMP would take the tent down. Thank you, Mr. Dady. Thank you, I'm sorry, but I have to keep an eye on the clock. The last questioner will be Ms. Blaney for 2.5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say that it is very distressing for me as a person who's worked on behalf of veterans for so long to hear about some of the activities that are happening that really disrespect such an important monument in our country. And I just have to reflect on the fact that I've had members from my own constituency all the way back in BC come all the way here to bring a memento of a loved one that they lost, that we arrange for it to be delivered. And that process is incredibly sacred, where people who protect that space receive it and bring it down below. And that person knows that their picture of their loved one, something that they've brought, is there to remember them. And this is just so distressing. So I'm just wondering if I can, through you, Mr. Chair, ask Mr. Dady one more question, which is, with this happening and people surrounding that space and putting up tents and desecrating it, as we've heard today, does this prevent any sort of scheduled maintenance of the monument from happening? I can't imagine that you can go there and make sure that things are cleaned and taken care of. And you also spoke about the people that go out and do those rounds. I'm just wondering, with this occupation, are they no longer able to do those rounds and really fulfill their commitment to that monument and to the people who serve this country? If I may, through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. An excellent question. And I will say, Mr. Chair, we're not, my people although courageous, and have done a lot during the last 3 weeks to support the City of Ottawa and Parliament, are not police officers. They don't carry gun, but they do continue with police escort to do their maintenance, to do the work that they need to do. And we're ensuring that the monuments that we maintain are kept in perfect shape, and that if there's an incident, it is restored right away, even in the middle of the night. Our team will go out and fix it to ensure that people don't have to see the desecration that has happened or the graffiti that was and the lack of respect that was made to such an important monument.
And sorry, but through you, Mr. Chair, I just hope that you will pass on our thanks to these amazing people who are doing this sacred work. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So that's all the time that we have, and c'est le moment pour moi.
It is time for me, and on behalf of committee members, I'd like to thank you, dear witnesses, for your contributions to the study we are undertaking. We have with us from National Defense, Stephen Harris, the Chief Historian, Directorate of History and Heritage, from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Stéphane Déry, Assistant Deputy Minister, Real Property Services Branch. And, by the way, Mr. Déry, you can always send us the playbook. You could send that to our clerk. Thank you. And finally, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Crystal Garrett-Baird, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and Commemoration. Do the committee members agree to adjourn this meeting at this time?
Voilà.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good evening.